A man stands before a burning pond, arms stretched wide like a conqueror, cameras rolling, crew watching, gasoline flames dancing on the water's surface. This isn't just television. This is a crime being committed in real time, broadcast to millions. His name is Tony Beets. They call him the King of the Klondike. A mining legend who turned frozen ground into a multi-million-dollar empire. But what the cameras didn't show you is the trail of destruction left behind. See, everyone focused on the gold, the massive dredges, the explosive personality, the thick Dutch accent that made him a household name. But nobody asked the real question. At what cost? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will completely shatter everything you thought you knew about reality TV's most celebrated mining legend. And the most shocking revelation? It's been hiding in plain sight for 15 seasons. The story begins on December 15th, 1959, in a tiny Dutch farming village called Wydanes. This wasn't glamorous. This wasn't destined for greatness. This was the middle of nowhere, where survival meant keeping your mouth shut and your hands busy. Young Tony learned the only lesson that mattered in rural Netherlands during the 1,960 seconds. Work hard or get left behind. Complaining was for the weak. Results were everything. But Tony Beets had something burning inside him that his small village couldn't contain. Ambition. Raw, unfiltered ambition that refused to accept a predictable life on Dutch farms. Fast forward to 1984. Tony is 24 years old, married to his wife Minnie, and they're making the most audacious gamble of their lives. They're leaving everything behind for Canada. No money in their pockets, no job lined up, no safety net. Just two people betting everything on themselves. The dream versus reality hit them hard. Those first years in Canada were humbling. Construction sites paid the bills. Manual labor kept food on the table. Tony took whatever work he could find. This wasn't the promised land. This was survival mode. But then something changed. Tony heard whispers about the Yukon Territory, stories of gold, tales of miners striking it rich in the frozen north. Most people heard those stories and stayed comfortable. Tony heard opportunity. He moved his growing family to Dawson City and started at the absolute bottom of the mining world, operating equipment in sub-zero temperatures, working shifts that would break most men, learning every single detail about gold mining from the ground up. And somewhere in that brutal apprenticeship, Tony Beets discovered his purpose. Not in the comfortable Netherlands, not in southern Canada, but in the unforgiving gold fields where only the toughest survive. By the time Tony reached his 60s, he transformed himself from a penniless immigrant into one of the Klondike's most successful miners. Multiple claims. Industrial equipment. Millions of dollars in gold pulled from the earth. The American dream achieved by a Dutch immigrant who refused to quit. Inspiring, right? That's exactly what Discovery Channel thought when they came knocking on his door. They had no idea what they were about to unleash. The year was 2010, and reality television was hungry for something real. Gold Rush had launched with modest success, following Todd Hoffman and his crew of amateur miners stumbling through Alaska. Audiences liked the struggle, but something was missing. Authenticity, expertise, someone who actually knew what the hell they were doing. Discovery Channel needed a veteran, a real miner who could show viewers what professional gold mining actually looked like. Someone with experience, equipment, and the personality to carry a television show. They found Tony Beets. Initially, Tony wanted nothing to do with reality television. Cameras felt like distractions. Fame seemed pointless. He was a miner, not an entertainer. But Discovery was persistent, and eventually, the financial incentives became impossible to ignore. The exposure alone could transform his business. Tony agreed to give it a shot. Season 2, Episode 1. Tony Beets exploded onto screens across America with the force of dynamite, that thick Dutch accent, that volcanic temper, that absolute refusal to sugarcoat anything. Viewers had never seen anyone like him. Here was a man who actually knew mining, who didn't pretend or perform, who cursed when things went wrong and demanded excellence from everyone around him. Audiences were mesmerized. Discovery had accidentally created a monster hit. Tony became the breakout star. His dredging operations raised the stakes of the entire show. His conflicts with other miners generated must-see drama. His teaching moments gave the show credibility. But something else was happening too. Something nobody at Discovery wanted to examine too closely. Every explosion of anger, every brutal takedown of his crew, every humiliating argument with other cast members. The cameras captured it all, and the editing team turned it into entertainment gold. Tony Beets wasn't just a miner anymore, he was a brand, a phenomenon. The king of the Klondike, ruling his frozen empire with an iron fist. And we all watched, cheering for his success, laughing at his outbursts, celebrating his dominance. Never once stopping to ask if what we were watching was actually okay. Because here's the thing about entertainment. It makes us complicit. Every view, every like, every share. We weren't just watching Tony Beets, we were funding what came next. Let's talk about October 2014, because this is where the mask should have slipped. This is where everyone should have realized something was deeply wrong. Tony's crew was filming for season 6 at Indian River. One of the workers grabbed a container of gasoline, poured it into the dredge pond, and lit it on fire. Flames erupted across the water's surface. They called it a Viking baptism. Tony stood there, arms outstretched, soaking in the moment while cameras rolled. Dramatic? Absolutely. Illegal? 100%. They had just violated the Yukon Waters Act, dumped hazardous materials into protected waters, committed an environmental crime with cameras documenting every second. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was reckless disregard for the law, broadcast as entertainment. 3 years later, the consequences finally arrived. August 2017. Tony and his company, Tamarack Incorporated, were fined $31,000. The subcontractor paid less than $2,000. Tony's public statement? Quote, "Since I am the man running the show, I guess I should have told him not to do it. Not an apology, not genuine remorse, just a shrug wrapped in words. I guess I should have stopped it." As if breaking environmental law was just another whoopsie moment. Discovery Channel aired the footage anyway. They showed a man committing a crime and framed it as bold television. That should have been the wake-up call. Instead, everyone moved on. The fine got paid, the show continued, business as usual. But the warning signs didn't stop there. They multiplied. Parker Schnabel entered Tony's world as a young, ambitious miner looking to learn from the best. What he got was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Tony criticized everything, mocked mistakes, demanded perfection while offering zero positive reinforcement. Nothing Parker did was ever good enough. Their relationship became a recurring nightmare of clashing egos and bitter arguments. Even when they started collaborating again in season 15 at Dominion Creek, the tension remained. Two men unable to coexist without conflict. Mentor and student turned into adversaries who barely tolerated each other. Then came the betrayal that should have shattered Tony's reputation completely. Season 14. Kevin Beets, Tony's own son, reached his breaking point. Kevin wanted control of the Southeast Alaska operation. Tony refused to let go. The power struggle escalated from disagreements to all-out war. Father against son. Control freak against someone desperate for autonomy. Kevin didn't just quit. He abandoned the operation mid-season, walked away from his father's crew, disappeared from the show. Think about what that means. Your own flesh and blood would rather walk away from a multi-million-dollar family business than spend another day under your control. That's not tough love. That's not high standards. That's toxicity so severe your own children can't breathe around you. Mike Beets, another son, flipped a $300,000 wash plant while trying to compensate for a previous error. The pressure of working for an eternally dissatisfied father led to catastrophic mistakes. Mike wasn't incompetent. Mike was drowning under impossible expectations. Tony's crew members walked on eggshells every single day. The line between demanding excellence and abusive management practices blurred until it vanished completely. And through it all, Discovery Channel captured every moment. Family destruction became plot points. Workplace toxicity became character development. Human cost became entertainment value. The warning signs weren't hidden. They were broadcast in high definition to millions of viewers every single week. We just chose to call it drama instead of recognizing it for what it really was. A pattern of behavior that destroyed relationships and broke people. Here's what nobody wants to admit. Discovery Channel didn't just document Tony Beets. They weaponized him for profit. Every argument got the full production treatment. Dramatic music swelling in the background, strategic camera angles capturing every facial expression, editing that stretched 5-minute disagreements into multi-episode storylines, cliffhangers designed to keep you watching through commercial breaks. The marketing department packaged Tony's explosive temper as authenticity. His cursing became his trademark. His refusal to show vulnerability got rebranded as old school values and traditional masculinity. They took toxic behavior and sold it as entertainment. The strategy worked flawlessly. When Tony screamed at his crew, ratings spiked. When he clashed with his sons, social media platforms exploded with commentary and debate. Conflict equals engagement. Engagement equals advertising revenue. The formula was simple and devastatingly effective. Discovery had zero incentive to address Tony's behavior patterns. Why would they? Tony Beets was making them millions of dollars. Asking the network to intervene would be like asking them to destroy their golden goose. They weren't going to fix what was generating massive profits. Gold Rush became Discovery Channel's longest-running, most successful series. By season 15, the franchise had spawned multiple spin-offs. Gold Rush, The Dirt, Whitewater. Gold Rush, Parker's Trail, Winter's Fortune. Every conceivable angle of gold mining got its own show. The empire expanded while the original series maintained impressive viewership numbers. What started as struggling miners in Alaska transformed into industrial-scale operations across multiple continents. The equipment got bigger, the stakes got higher, the drama intensified, and Tony Beets grew right alongside it. His operations expanded dramatically. His wealth multiplied. His reputation as a mining genius became cemented in reality television history. Discovery crowned him the king of the Klondike, and we all accepted it without question. But empires built on domination don't come without casualties. Every success story has a shadow, and Tony's shadow grew longer with every passing season. His relationship with Kevin remained fractured. His relationship with Mike was built on fear rather than respect. His crew's loyalty was purchased with paychecks and maintained through intimidation rather than inspiration. His legacy became an empire constructed on burnt bridges and broken relationships. And through it all, we kept watching, week after week, season after season, consuming the dysfunction, sharing the clips, making Tony Beets a cultural phenomenon. 15 seasons later, Tony Beets is still mining, still on television, still wearing the crown as the king of the Klondike. The consequences for his actions? Minimal at best. A $31,000 fine that barely made a dent in his fortune. Damaged relationships that became storylines rather than wake-up calls. Crew problems that got framed as entertainment rather than workplace issues. Discovery profited enormously from his dysfunction. Audiences consumed it as quality entertainment. Tony got richer and more famous. Everyone won, right? Except for the people who actually paid the price. Kevin took an entire year away from mining, desperately trying to escape his father's overwhelming shadow. When he finally returned to the family business, nothing had fundamentally changed. Tony was still Tony. The same controlling presence, the same impossible standards, the same suffocating dynamic. Mike kept trying to prove himself, knowing deep down that it would never be enough. The goalpost would always move. The approval would never come. Parker Schnabel moved on completely, building his own successful mining empire without the toxic mentorship weighing him down. And Tony's crew members, they stayed for the substantial paychecks, not because they loved the work environment. Fear and money make poor substitutes for genuine loyalty and respect. Some people call this tough love. Some say it's just how old school bosses operate. Some claim it's the price of excellence and success. But let's call it what it actually is. A cautionary tale about what happens when achievement comes at the expense of every meaningful relationship in your life. Will Tony Beets ever change? Perhaps. Age has a way of softening even the hardest edges. But 15 seasons of consistent behavior patterns suggest otherwise. Leopards rarely change their spots, especially when those spots made them famous and wealthy. The uncomfortable truth is that Discovery Channel took a gamble on following ordinary people digging in dirt, and that gamble transformed into absolute gold for the network. The show changed lives, created careers, built fortunes, made dreams come true. But the real question we should be asking isn't whether Gold Rush was successful. The real question is whether we should have been entertained by it in the first place. Whether watching someone destroy relationships for our amusement is something we should celebrate. Tony Beets proved you can come from absolutely nothing and build everything. He showed that immigrants can achieve the American dream through sheer determination and refusal to quit. But he also proved something darker, that empires built on fear and domination don't create lasting legacies. Eventually, everyone walks away. Eventually, you're left alone at the top. The king of the Klondike sits on his throne today. But look closer and you'll see what that throne is really made of. Isolation, broken trust, relationships sacrificed for gold. That's the real price of empire, and no amount of gold can buy back what's been lost. So here's my question for you. Is Tony Beets a demanding genius who pushes people to excellence? Or did reality television normalize behavior that should never have been celebrated? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation matters. If this video changed your perspective on Gold Rush and reality television, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories behind the stories. Because Tony Beets isn't the only king with a dark reign hiding behind entertainment. And trust me, the next story we're uncovering is even more shocking. See you in the next one.